The essential element of horror lies in tapping into the fears of the moment. The greatest horror stories often reflect the cultural anxieties of their time, with a good villain crystallizing those fears. Similarly, the greatest supervillains in fiction embody the primal fears that reside in the human psyche, and Batman's rogues gallery provides perfect examples of this concept. Each of the Caped Crusaders' iconic foes, from the Joker to even the Condiment King, represents a dark reflection of the human condition. Yet, for every legendary adversary in Batman's world, there are many lesser-known villains waiting for their turn in the spotlight, ready to evolve and resonate with the new fears of today's world. 10. Otis Flanagan, the Ratcatcher. The most recent entry in the beloved Arkham game series, Batman, Arkham Shadow, introduced a reimagined version of the Ratcatcher through the character of the Rat King and his cult. Instead of being a silly gimmick-driven villain who trains attack rats, the Rat King embodies a deeper, more complex ideology. He recruits criminals, the homeless, and others who are overlooked, offering them care and the promise of dismantling the system that has failed them. In the wake of 2022's The Batman, it's clear that the Dark Knight's adversaries are evolving to reflect today's socio-political landscape, with both Paul Dano's Riddler and the Rat King being motivated by a wide gap in economic classes. Now would be the perfect time to introduce a version of Ratcatcher that draws from Rat King to the Batman comics. 9. Thomas Blake, the Catman. Since the 1986 release of The Dark Knight Returns, Batman has been caught in a cycle of growing darker and grittier, with the brighter tone of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s fading away. Except for brief diversions, such as the animated Batman, the brave and the bold, the Dark Knight has consistently lived up to his name as a brooding figure in bleak stories. Thomas Blake, the often derided Catman, could serve as a perfect foil to these oppressive tones. In recent appearances, Catman has been portrayed as possessing a morality not often seen in Batman's rogues, acting more heroically than expected. In this capacity, he could counterbalance Batman by bringing a sense of fun to their lifestyle, while also reminding the Dark Knight of the importance of helping those in need. 8. Arthur Brown, the Clue Master. Sometimes a silly comic book villain is reinvented as a gritty and terrifying icon of evil, while still retaining the core elements that made them appealing. Other times, a cool makeover completely severs the villain from their original identity. If Arthur Brown, the calculating Clue Master, were to receive a fresh update, his goofy gimmick should remain intact. Filling a role similar to the Riddler, Clue Master's relative obscurity could work in his favor, with the inevitable comparisons embraced rather than avoided. Like many Silver Age Batman villains, Clue Master faded into obscurity and is now best remembered as the father of Stephanie Brown, who was first Spoiler, then Robin, and later Batgirl. One of his most notable portrayals, which could inspire future stories, is from a 2004 episode of the Batman animated series. In this version, Arthur is hilariously reimagined as a man who never recovered from losing a childhood quiz show, spending 20 years plotting revenge against the other contestants. This absurd backstory highlights the charm of Clue Master's ridiculousness, while leaving room for deeper exploration of his character. 7. Warren White, the Great White Shark. With the conclusion of HBO's The Penguin, a compelling spotlight has been placed on the ordinary people swept up in the waves of chaos that engulf Gotham City. Sophia Falcone is a powerhouse character that translated beautifully to the screen, and more figures should be molded in her image. This calls to mind a similarly layered character whose transformation was even more dramatic: Warren White, better known as the Great White Shark. Warren White began as a crooked investor who feigned insanity to be sent to Arkham Asylum instead of Blackgate Penitentiary. However, upon entering Arkham, White endured relentless physical and psychological torment until his mind truly did snap. After losing his facial features to frostbite, he embraced Arkham's theatricality and rebranded himself as the Great White Shark, becoming a financial backer for Gotham's villains. It's a tragedy that so many stories like this in Gotham go completely untold, and White's story is ripe for deeper exploration. 6. David Cain, Master Assassin. Like most Batman villains, David Cain serves as a dark mirror of Bruce Wayne. However, A unique difference sets them apart. Batman uses his combat skills with restraint, neutralizing enemies without inflicting permanent harm. David Cain, on the other hand, has no such limitations. While Batman believes in mercy, Cain does not. Trained by the League of Assassins, Cain even mentored a young Bruce Wayne during his global journey to master combat. He is best known, however, as the father of Cassandra Cain, one of the greatest fighters in the DC universe. Cain weaponized his daughter's childhood by teaching her to fight but not to speak, further highlighting the chilling parallels between David Cain and the Dark Knight. 5. Basil Carlo, the original Clayface. Today, Clayface is best known as the shape-shifting member of Batman's rogues gallery, frequently involved in plots of body doubles and faked deaths. However, many fans might not realize that the original Clayface, Basil Carlo, had no superpowers at all. In his Golden Age debut, Carlo was an actor who had once played Clayface in a stage play called The Terror and starred in the horror classic Dread Castle. When he learned that Dread Castle was being remade without him, Carlo donned the Clayface mask and began killing his way through the film's cast and crew before being stopped by Batman and Robin. While subsequent reinventions of the character have overshadowed Basil Carlo's story, the original concept of a murderer hiding in plain sight remains just as potent today. As Batman faces increasingly absurd spectrum of threats, the grounded horror of an ordinary person driven to murder serves as a stark reminder of his roots. Batman as a concept should always serve as a window into the human side of superheroics. 4. Jezebel Jet, member of the Black Glove. Batman has no shortage of villains who challenge him on fundamental levels. Two-Face confronts the hypocrisy of justice through violence, while Scarecrow weaponizes fear in ways Batman refuses to. However, there is a notable lack of villains who challenge Bruce Wayne himself. Jezebel Jet, introduced during Grant Morrison's tenure on Batman, is the perfect counter to Bruce's vain and vapid playboy facade, as her public image is also a carefully constructed disguise. While Bruce feigns shallowness to mask his compassionate crusade as Batman, Jezebel's philanthropic work, inspired by the loss of her parents, hides her affiliation with the Black Glove, a group dedicated to dismantling Batman psychologically. By exploiting Batman's emotions and the wounded child at the heart of Bruce Wayne, Jezebel didn't need a flashy costume or codename to deliver one of the most devastating blows to Batman's life. 3. Jeremiah Arkham, the Second Black Mask. Touching on the legacy of the Arkham family and the institution they built, one of the most profound themes in Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum, a serious house on a serious earth, is the idea of generational madness. Elizabeth Arkham suffered from severe mental illness, which her son, Amadeus, inherited. This instability ultimately led Amadeus to create the asylum, only for him to later become one of its inmates. The legacy of mental illness seems to have passed to Jeremiah Arkham, Amadeus's nephew. Initially introduced as the asylum's new administrator, Jeremiah was driven to madness by his obsessive belief that every patient could be cured, continuing the Arkham family's tragic pattern. After Batman's supposed death in 2008's Final Crisis, Jeremiah took up the mantle of the new Black Mask, though these developments were erased with 2011's The New 52. While Jeremiah's stint as Black Mask has faded into obscurity, his significance in Batman's mythology persists. He was later revealed as the father of Astrid Arkham, the comic book version of the Arkham Knight, introduced in Detective Comics issue number 1000. 2. Lonnie Machine, the First Anarchy. Every great fictional villain, regardless of their context, should represent something. Whether it's the embodiment of rage like Jason Voorhees or the unknowable nature of evil like Michael Myers, notable adversaries resonate because they represent fundamental concepts. Increasingly, however, comic book villains seem to lack this depth, often reduced to their core gimmicks. Even the Joker, once imagined as a criminal artist treating crime as his medium, has devolved into a chaotic figure engaging in anarchy for its own sake, leaving the character in an odd narrative limbo. Lonnie Machine, the original bearer of the mantle of Anarchy, is a prime example of a villain capable of representing larger real-world ideas. Through him, themes like anti-militarism, environmentalism, and social unrest can be explored in meaningful ways. Thanks to his appearances in Beware the Batman, Batman, Arkham Origins, and Arrow, Lonnie Machine hasn't completely faded into obscurity. Still, the time has come for Anarchy to take center stage again and challenge Batman's adherence to the status quo. 1. The Hole in Things. The Hole in Things is not a strictly physical villain, but more of an abstract concept that has haunted Batman throughout his entire existence. At its core, the hole in things represents the eternal, unknowable misery and mystery that drives Batman forward. For Bruce Wayne, the original hole in things was the death of his parents, a senseless and tragic event that forever altered the course of his life. Later, as Batman, a new hole emerged with the death of Jason Todd at the hands of the Joker, a loss Bruce could have prevented in multiple ways. At every turn of his life, Batman encounters a new hole in things that will inevitably propel him forward. The hole itself is not just the absence of something. It symbolizes the endless cycle of tragedy and triumph in Batman's life. It is a mystery solved only to give rise to another as fresh adversaries emerge from the shadows. From the supernatural Mr. Whisper to the bandaged face of Hush to the twisted Simon Hurt, the hole in things is ever present, wearing different guises, but remaining constant in its challenge. It patiently waits for each new writer to further explore the eternal struggle between life and death in Gotham City.